They labored under the sun, yet their suffering ran far deeper than the fields could show. Behind closed doors, unspeakable exploitation stripped enslaved men of agency, dignity, and sometimes life itself. White masters and mistresses celebrated for wealth and civility, wielded authority that reached beyond labor, controlling bodies, minds, and intimate lives. Exploitation was not only physical, but psychological and sexual, often concealed from public eyes. How could these secret horrors remain buried for centuries? The American South of the 17th through 19th centuries was a world of stark contrasts. Magnificent mansions towered over cramped, harsh quarters where enslaved men lived under constant surveillance. Opulence and civility masked cruelty. Every gesture and glance carried power and threat. The social hierarchy was rigid. Masters at the apex, mistresses wielding domestic authority, enslaved men subjected to endless labor, and enslaved women and children bearing the weight of both toil and oppression. Imagine living every day knowing your body and life are not your own. Enslaved men endured relentless labor and coercion, often threatened with punishment, family separation, or worse. Masters and mistresses used food, privileges, and threats as instruments of control. Consent was impossible. Survival depended on compliance and silence. Every favor could be a trap, every glance a command, and every act of obedience a fragile shield against violence. The system turned daily life into a labyrinth of fear, where even small choices carried unimaginable consequences. Private spaces, servant quarters, stables, hidden rooms became arenas for abuse. Diaries, letters, and oral histories reveal the terrifying realities: sexual coercion, physical punishment, and manipulation under the guise of discipline. The abuse was often hidden, yet its effects were enduring. Promises of minor privileges or leniency were exchanged for compliance, leaving men trapped in cycles of fear and obedience. The walls kept silent what the hearts could never forget. The emotional and physical toll was profound. Shame, fear, and loss of identity were constant companions. Bodies endured punishment, overwork, and injury, while minds carried trauma invisible to outsiders. Families were fractured, and psychological scars passed quietly from one generation to the next. How do you survive when every choice comes with unimaginable risk? Survival was never freedom. It was a tenuous negotiation with cruelty itself. Modern historians began uncovering the hidden abuses through meticulous research. WPA slave narratives, estate records, diaries, and personal testimonies revealed fragments of lives erased from public memory. Subtle language, references to men kept close or favored by the mistress, hinted at coercion and manipulation, exposing a systemic pattern of abuse embedded within the structure of slavery. These acts were not isolated incidents. They were part of a pervasive culture of control where authority over body and life went unquestioned. Even in secrecy, the truth endured, whispered through stories, passed down through generations, and preserved in memory. Confronting these histories shattered the sanitized image of plantation life. White mistresses, long perceived as fragile or virtuous, emerged as agents of power capable of inflicting profound psychological and physical harm. Communities, historians, and descendants grappled with shock, denial, and heartbreak. Acknowledging these abuses was necessary, not only to restore humanity to the enslaved men whose lives were manipulated and violated, but to confront the broader moral implications of systemic exploitation. Can history ever be fully understood if the experiences of the victims remain hidden? The cultural reckoning extended beyond scholarship. Museums, documentaries, and literature began to incorporate these uncomfortable truths, giving voice to men whose experiences were erased for centuries. Academics reframed these acts as systemic abuses of power rather than isolated indiscretions. Public memory, long sanitized and romanticized, was forced to recognize a more complicated reality. Cruelty can wear the mask of civility, oppression can reside in domestic spaces, and trauma can ripple through generations, unseen yet deeply felt. Unchecked authority in private spaces left indelible marks. White mistresses, constrained in public but empowered in domestic spheres, exercised control without accountability. Enslaved men had no legal protection, no means to resist, and no safe avenue for speaking out. Survival required compliance and silence. Fear was a constant companion. The system thrived on secrecy and obedience, leaving a legacy of psychological wounds, intergenerational trauma, and cultural scars that outlasted slavery itself. The emotional consequences were devastating. Survivors carried fear, shame, and internalized trauma into adulthood. Families inherited the quiet echoes of oppression, and communities were shaped by unspoken legacies. Lives were defined by survival under coercion, leaving masculinity, trust, and identity fractured. Yet through fragments preserved in narratives and recollections, the stories endured, demanding acknowledgement and moral reckoning. These whispers of the past reveal the hidden contours of power, abuse, and survival in a society built on ownership and control. Even as physical plantations decayed, the lessons of these abuses remain urgent. History attempted to conceal them, but the voices of enslaved men insist on being heard. Empty corridors, overgrown fields, and faded records bear silent witness to lives controlled, manipulated, and coerced. Remembering these histories is not only an act of acknowledgement, but also a moral imperative, ensuring that such abuses of power are neither forgotten nor repeated. The hidden exploitation shaped generations. Survivors carried fear, shame, and trauma into adulthood, while communities inherited the echoes of suffering. Masculinity, identity, and trust were fractured. Every act of compliance was both survival and silent protest. The recovered narratives demand recognition, forcing society to confront the moral consequences of domination disguised as civility. Even after the plantations crumbled, the legacies of abuse endured. Attics, servant quarters, and private rooms, once arenas of coercion, stand as silent witnesses. Diaries, letters, and oral histories preserved fragments of memory, exposing the invisible yet pervasive reach of power. The past is never truly past when the human cost persists through generations, affecting families, communities, and cultural memory. History attempted to silence these men, yet their stories insist on being heard. Empty corridors, overgrown fields, and faded photographs bear witness to lives constrained, manipulated, and coerced. Confronting this past is not about assigning blame alone. It is about understanding, restoring dignity, and ensuring that such abuses are never repeated. Only by remembering can society honor those who endured unimaginable coercion and reclaim lessons for the present. The legacy extends beyond slavery itself, shaping ideas of vulnerability, authority, and trust. Abuse moved through unexpected channels, including the hands of those long perceived as innocent, leaving enduring emotional and cultural scars. These truths are uncomfortable, often invisible, yet essential. To acknowledge them is to honor the lives of enslaved men, ensure remembrance, and prevent history from repeating its cruelties. The secret exploitation enslaved men endured shaped lives, defined generations, and left wounds that echo through time. Their stories demand to be told, witnessed, and remembered. Power corrupted, innocence was stolen, and trauma endured. Only through acknowledgement, understanding, and remembrance can the past yield lessons, justice, and recognition. The walls may be empty now, the fields silent, but the echoes of their suffering continue to speak, insisting that we listen. History is not simply a record of events, it is a mirror reflecting the depths of human cruelty and resilience. The hidden abuses of enslaved men remind us that power, when unchecked, corrupts, and that silence can be as harmful as overt violence. Their voices, once suppressed, now call upon us to bear witness, to remember, and to confront uncomfortable truths. Only through this engagement can the wounds of the past begin to heal, and only through remembrance can justice and dignity be restored to those who suffered in silence.